Hello, it's DC and Kat, and we are back together again for another transcript reading from Young Living v doTERRA. And it's been a little while. It's been, I think, exactly 7 days since we read something, and it just needed to happen. I've got Sky artwork behind me, and I'm stoked to have 2 essential oil bottles behind me to accompany me as we read these transcripts.
We were just saying before, it seems like it's been forever since we were on, but it's been a week exactly, but it seems like longer.
Yes, exactly. Hi, Tanya. Sky, look, it's your artwork right there. I'm going to have more of her artwork behind me, so at least everyone can see it for the whole time. Avery, Tanya, Sky, hello, hello, hello. I'm DC. I'm an MLM dropout. I was in Young Living up until April 24th of this year. I joined in 2019, and I'm out. I'm out now. And yeah, and surprisingly, when Kat and I started reading this, I did not know that she herself was inadvertently, unbeknownst to her, signed up as a brand partner.
I forget often. I forgot for the longest time, but yeah. So I was trying to support one of my friends. She was another military. When you're in the military, just depends, but a lot of times you're moving around ever so often, and you're around, especially if you live on post, you're going to know other people in similar situations. And so my friend, she was also in an MLM. I was in a different MLM, but she was in Young Living, and I wanted to support her. So I purchased the starter kit. So I thought starter meant like you are starting in just dabbling in essential oils. I did not, and this was on me, but I probably should have understood that as you're starting a business. I didn't know that though. But yeah, so I don't know how she got like my information. Like I don't know. But I was a distributor for a year, and I just got that one purchase from her.
That's crazy. Yeah. And so if you've missed the other live streams, you're probably about 12 hours behind, but that's okay. I'm working on the Spark Notes. Here is, the background is thanks to Sky and her amazing artistic talent. We are going to be swapping it out for every live stream. She's made me some boxing oil. She's made some lawyers fighting with essential oils. It's a good time. Here's the Spark Notes that you need to know. Gary Young has been on the witness stand, and he couldn't remember anything. Rob James was on the witness stand, and he, for medical reasons, could not remember some things. And now we are about to listen to Justin Harrison be directly examined by Mr. Toth, I think. Yes, Mr. Toth's going to go first. And here's some interesting points we found. Gary Young, although he denies it, was gallivanting, was moonlighting as a doctor. And he said he wasn't. He was just part of the surgical team in Ecuador. And we've also heard that he made his employees watch video of him performing his non-surgical procedures on people. And also found that Young Living did not acquire the amount of farms that it would have taken to keep up supply to how many distributors they had. So that's been interesting as well. So lots of things are coming out in these transcripts, and we've been using some of the voice mods
we've been using Baby Snark for Gary Young, and we've been using
Polite Demon Lawyer for some of the other people. So
we're trying to make this as interesting as possible because we know it can be a little dry. We take lots of snack breaks, we take lots of drink breaks, and we take lots of what the hell did we just read breaks. And so we're trying to chat with the live chat as much as possible. I totally sideswiped Kat. Let Kat tell you how incredible she is, what she does. She's an MLM destroyer herself. She helped take down Boo with Kira.
A lot of people.
A lot of other people. And I'm not going to name everybody because y'all know me. I'm going to get anxiety and forget names. Again, the reason we have these transcripts is because of Kira Manchester, who is Mombi, and she has all the tea. She's an incredible advocate. So I'm going to go ahead and hand the microphone.
I just talk about nutrition-related MLMs. MLMs, I'm not a fan of, for obvious reasons, if you're here. But education-wise on my channel, I focus in on the nutrition-related ones. I'm a licensed registered dietitian nutritionist, certified personal trainer, and so I just tend to focus on more of the health-related ones.
I love, Kat, how you just slide it in there that you're just a registered dietitian and licensed personal trainer. I remember when my friend was studying to be a registered dietitian, it's hard. It's a hard test to pass, at least from what I understood.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, it's just nonchalantly like, yeah, it's kind of hard, but yeah. So
that was years ago.
Low key, like saying how chill it is. It was awesome. We have a great time together. And if you don't already follow her channel, she makes incredible content, and go follow her. Yes, she is super smart and she's super humble. So, I mean, don't let her actual true modesty deflect from like how much you should follow her. So, yes. Okay. Let me see.
Some of the highlighting. We're doing the highlighting that I highlighted. Oh, there's a delay.
Yep, we are.
So it's not
perfect.
It's some of them are because I was doing it just like with my Apple Pen, and so it's a little bit. It's not squares perfect like yours.
Oh no, it's good. I mean, it looks beautiful to me, but we let's see, add to stream. This is yours, correct? Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. So there's some intro proceeding stuff we're not going to read because it's the back and forth of, hey, this objection, all this other stuff. And so this is when Justin Harrison starts on page 7, if that's okay with you.
Mm-hmm. That works.
Okay. Do we want? Oh, wow. Okay, great. Which live chat? Which voice should we have be? You need to vote if we do Baby Snark or Polite Demon Lawyer, and who should be it? Should Justin Harrison be someone, or should Baby Snark be someone? We're gonna let live chat decide it, and we'll wait for that to start. We'll hear y'all to answer.
Yeah, so here's an example of Baby Snark. Gary Young was an incredible Baby Snark, and
Polite, Upset, Complaining Demon Lawyer was last week as well. So those are our 2 choices.
Amazing.
Yes. It makes it a little bit easier to read through because it's like, oh yeah, there's voices involved. We love Kat having a real certification. We do love that. Baby Snark. Okay, so do we want Justin Harrison, who still works for doTERRA, to be Baby Snark, or do we want Mr. Toth to be Baby Snark?
And just so y'all know, Toth is with Young Living.
Yes. Baby Snark. Okay. So do we want Mr. Toth to be Baby Snark? Yes, I think Baby Snark is all of our favorites. So y'all have to decide. Let us know in the live chat. Baby Snark for Mr. Toth or Baby Snark for Justin Harrison?
Harrison's doTERRA. Toth is Young Living's attorney.
Yep. Okay, we've got 1 vote for Toth. Oh no. My mouse is being a brat.
Whoever's with Young Living. Yeah, so 2 for Toth.
Okay. All right. Cool. We'll do that. We're going to go ahead.
3.
We'll do that. Okay, so I'll be Toth since I have the voice mod, and I'm going to go ahead and throw Mr. Toth up here on the board so we know who's talking.
All right.
Right. Okay. Oh, we've got to vote for Justin. Demons for Satan oils. Oh my gosh. Okay, and there's probably going to be a switch, so we'll make sure everyone gets a turn. Okay, I'm going to be Mr. Toth. Okay.
Sounds good.
Mr. Toth. Good morning, Mr. Harrison.
Justin Harrison and Justin Toth.
Uh-oh. Wait, no. Oh God.
They're both Justin? I think they're both just. They're both just. I didn't know Mr. Toth's first name.
Justin Toth and Justin Harrison.
Yeah.
Okay, you'll have to tell us then. Justin Toth or Justin Harrison. Justin Harrison is a doTERRA rep, and Justin Toth is a attorney.
2 Justins. Oh, okay. All right. Good morning.
We're both Justins. Okay.
Yeah, we're both Justin.
Okay, I'll be doTERRA, baby.
Hair.
I'll be answering. Yeah. Okay.
Top.
Wait, I'm questioning.
You
did this last time.
Yeah. Okay. I'm Toth, right?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Good morning, Mr. Harrison.
Good morning.
I'm Justin Toth. Do you remember me?
I do.
I'm the attorney who took your deposition, I think back in September of 2013?
Correct.
Let's get right into this. You're currently the founding master distributor for doTERRA, correct?
Yes.
And that means your distributor number is 1001, correct?
Yes.
So that sort of means there's nobody above you at doTERRA.
Correct.
You're at the top of the doTERRA food chain?
Yes.
And you give us a sense, give us a little description of what the master distributor does at doTERRA.
So as a master distributor, I guess I should say, I work with our team to develop, teach, and train. I invite new members to be part of doTERRA. I seek out new customers to set an example for all of our team leaders, to lead by example. I attend the company events, of course, promote doTERRA in general.
For those of us, I'm obviously learned a lot about network marketing in the last years I've been on this case. For those on the jury that are not familiar with how network marketing works, when you are describing a meeting, what is a meeting? How do you network market with people?
So usually we have classes or events where existing members of the company will invite guests or not. They might not. And they'll come to learn about the product or the business or both, depending on the theme of the class.
So, Mr. Harrison, we've heard a little bit about this reference, but you used it right here. You said people learn about the product and the business. Because in network marketing, there are 2 things, right? We have a product that we're selling, and there's a business opportunity we're selling also, right?
Correct.
Tell me how you would go about. Give us a general sense, just quickly, how you describe the product that doTERRA sells.
Essential oils and essential oil-based products, aromatherapy, emotional support, natural food supplements, supplementation of all kinds, hair care, body care, really focusing on having a natural alternative to people, support the health of their family.
And how do you describe the business? I know this gets more in detail. Give us a general sense. How do you describe the business opportunity?
So the business really, it's not for our primary focus, which maybe distinguishes us from a lot of companies. It's an ancillary product, a secondary product for those that have an interest. It's basically word of mouth referral marketing. This worked for me. We do it all the time. When we find something we like, we tell people. So in this model, you get paid for it. Should someone set up an account, become a customer, enrolled, you get compensated for it, right?
let's switch and talk a little bit about your employment at Young Living now, okay?
Okay.
If I'm correct in my memory, Mr. Harrison, you were employed there for about 10 years?
7 years.
7 years. Your memory is better than mine. I apologize. So you were employed there for about 7 years?
Yes.
And by the end of that time period, you had been promoted to a director level position related to sales, correct?
Regional business director. Yes.
And what were you doing in that position? Give us a general sense of your job description in that role.
So I worked, my primary responsibility in that role was to speak at the company convention, company regional events, present the company at functions. I would work with the high-level Young Living leadership, meaning distributors. That's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Did you do meetings with other Young Living distributors?
There were times that high-level Young Living leaders would invite me to come to some of their meetings.
Would you participate in conference calls where you would support high-level distributors in doing meetings with their downlines?
Usually it was just calls with them, not with their teams.
Did you ever do meetings from the stage where you would describe the product and the business opportunity?
Yes, generally at corporate functions, yes.
Sorry, I lost my place. Crap. I don't know what line I'm on.
I just looked at the chat too, so I lost it.
Oh, where's that?
10. It was 10. Usually it was just calls with them, not with their teams.
Okay. Did you ever do meetings from the stage where you would describe the product and the business opportunity?
Yes, generally at corporate functions, yes.
And in fact, in that role as a regional sales director, you became acquainted with hundreds of Young Living distributors during your time at Young Living, correct?
I think hundreds is probably a big number. There was an maybe elite is not the best word. There was a smaller group of high-level Young Living distributors. Those were the primary people that I would work with.
Okay. And I agree with you that, I'm not going to disagree. Quote, hundreds, end quote, is a big number. But you'd agree with me that you became acquainted with hundreds of Young Living distributors in that position.
I still think hundreds is too big of a word, maybe 40 to 50.
Do you remember it was actually on September 23rd of 2013 when I took your deposition?
Uh-huh. Affirmative.
Do you remember that it took probably 4 or 5 hours, 6 hours?
I think it was all day, yeah. Yes.
And when we did that, when you sat down initially, you took an oath to tell the truth. Do you remember that?
Correct. Feisty Toth.
We sat down, there was a court reporter there, and I was there. And we asked questions kind of just like this, except the jury wasn't there. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach?
The judge says, yes, of course.
Mr. Harrison, I'm going to hand you what is a sealed copy of your deposition from September 23rd, 2013. And sir, I'm going to ask you to turn to let me ask you to begin by, did you have a chance to review this deposition after it was given?
I did.
And you got to review your testimony and see that you said in response to my questions, correct?
Correct.
And you had a chance, if there were any mistakes, you had a chance to correct them. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And then you signed a notarization at the end saying, those are all my corrections, or if I have any correction. That's it?
Yes.
Let
Correct.
me ask you to turn to page 98.
Okay.
Let me direct your attention to line 16 on page 98.
Okay.
And I asked you a series of questions. I asked you this question, quote, how many people would you say, how many Young Living distributors were acquaintances of yours that you made while you were working at Young Living, end quote. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
What was your answer?
Quote, acquaintances, there would be hundreds. That I knew better, that I would consider a friend, would be maybe 24, end quote.
Okay. You couldn't name for us sitting here today, sir, all the people you became acquainted with at Young Living, could you?
No, sir, not after this. Not after 9.5 years, no.
You probably couldn't have done it back in 2013, fair to say?
I probably could have named the ones I worked with regularly, yes.
You probably couldn't name those hundreds of acquaintances, could you?
The people that I would meet out in the field that I didn't know, no.
Do you remember that you entered a confidential and proprietary information agreement with Young Living?
I do not.
Would you please put Exhibit 27 up? Exhibit 27 is already in, Council?
Mr. Gaylord says, yep.
And I'd like to direct your attention to paragraph 3.
Sorry, Mr. Toth, can I have a paper copy, a hard copy?
Absolutely. I apologize, Mr. Harrison. I actually have a witness binder for you, Mr. Harrison, to simplify this so you're not having to jump through all that. Your Honor, I have a witness binder for you also if you need the exhibits.
The court says thank you.
Mr. Todd, that's me. That's that first exhibit there. What will be convenient about this, Mr. Harrison, is your binder. Rather than having to jump all over the place, you're going to have all this in sequential order. You've got Exhibit 27 here. It's right behind that, 27. You can turn right to it.
This is at number 4.
Turn to Exhibit 27. It should be tab 27.
There's no tab 27. Oh, there is. Sorry. It was hiding.
No worries.
Okay, I got it.
And if you look at Exhibit 27, there's this paragraph. It says it's to, quote, memorialize employees' agreement not to solicit, divert, or take away, or attempt to solicit, divert, or take away any customers, business, or patrons of Young Living upon whom employee called or whom employee serviced or solicited or with whom employee became acquainted as a result of employment with Young Living for a period of 1 year from the date of termination of employment of Young Living, end quote. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
You understand it's a stipulated fact in this case, sir, that you entered that agreement.
I do. Even though I don't recall doing it, I do understand that.
And you understood that that is a fact in this case.
That has been stipulated too? Yes.
Yes. So let's do something real quick. Your Honor, do you mind if I put this in the same spot Mr. Smith did the other day?
The court says that's fine.
Mr. Toth said, I'm hoping you can see this. If you can't, that's all right.
I'll let you know otherwise.
Hopefully, everyone can see that. All right. Mr. Harrison, there are a number of words on that. So when we look at this, it says, quote, to memorialize employees' agreement not to solicit, divert, or take away, end quote. I'd like to ask you, with your experience, there's the word, quote, divert, end quote. Do you see that?
Uh-huh. Affirmative.
What does the word, quote, divert, end quote, mean to you?
Mr. Gaylord says, objection, Your Honor. May I approach? The court says, yes. A sidebar discussion was had. Back to Mr. Gaylord. He said, just for the record, Your Honor, that objection is sustained. The court said yes. And Mr. Gaylord said, thank you. And back to Mr. Toth.
Mr. Toth, so the agreement says, Mr. Harrison, that you cannot divert any customers, business patrons of Young Living, correct?
It appears so, yes.
And it also says that you can't take away any customers, business, or patrons of Young Living, correct?
Correct.
And you cannot solicit them, correct?
Correct.
And it even says, does it not, sir, that you cannot attempt to do any of those things either, doesn't it?
Correct.
Okay. Were you in here for Mr. Gaylord's opening statement?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall him talking about a word where he said there's a, quote, class, end quote, of, do you remember that word? He put it up on his PowerPoint.
I do.
Sorry. I didn't realize Mr. Toth was going to be this sassy, but it's just reading this way.
I love it.
I want you to look at, he talked about there are certain types of distributors you might be able to solicit, might not be able to solicit. You remember that. And they were in that class.
Yes.
Let's talk about that class and how it's defined here, okay?
Okay.
The agreement says you cannot engage in any of these activities or attempt to do them with anyone that you became. Let's see. What is that language? Quote, upon whom employee called, end quote. Okay? There's one. Anyone that you called, correct? Is that right?
Mr. Gaylord says, Your Honor, I'm going to object for the same grounds as I did before.
I'm not asking.
Parole evidence, Mr. Gaylord said.
Mr. Toth said, I'm not asking for his interpretation, Your Honor. We're simply going through the agreement.
The judge says, I'll allow that. Overruled.
Mr. Toth, so anyone that you called, correct?
I don't know if that means called.
Sir, I'm not asking. The judge has already ruled on it. I'm not asking for your interpretation. I'm asking what the agreement says.
Mr. Gaylord said, objection, Your Honor. The document speaks for itself. And the judge said, overruled. We can go through it. It's all right.
Thank you, Your Honor. That was serviced. See that?
Yes.
Oh, that you serviced, sorry. See that?
Yes.
Okay. Or that you solicited. Do you see that?
I do.
And then there's another word. It says, quote, or with whom you became acquainted, end quote. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. For 1 year after the date of your employment. Correct?
Correct.
You understand that doing any of those things or attempting to do them would violate your agreement with Young Living, right?
Understood when? While I was employed there?
Understood what this agreement said. Yeah, absolutely. This is your stipulated agreement in this case, sir. You understood that any of those things would be a violation of your agreement with Young Living.
Again, I don't recall signing it. Mr. Gaylord said, objection, Your Honor. That calls for a legal conclusion. The court says, overruled.
Mr. Toth, and you knew that prohibition existed until February 11th, 2009, correct?
I actually didn't know the prohibition existed until this document was produced to me. Hey, Karina.
Well, let's quickly turn to page 4 of this agreement.
That's the last page?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Would you, Miss Sater, would you please blow up the signature line? I just want to know. Let me back up, Mr. Harrison. You understand that it's a stipulated fact that...
Mr. Gaylord says, objection, Your Honor.
And then, I say, you entered this agreement, correct?
The court says, what's the objection? Mr. Gaylord said, asked and answered. It's already a stipulated fact. Doesn't need to ask him to confirm that. The court says, sustained.
Mr. Toss said, let's change subjects, Mr. Harrison. Let's talk a little bit about your departure from Young Living and your move to doTERRA, okay? You resigned from Young Living on Monday, February 11th, 2008, correct?
Correct.
And you resigned in the morning, is that so?
Yes.
And you left because you thought that Young Living had become, quote, a very caustic environment, end quote, correct?
That was one of the many reasons, yes.
And you had been thinking about resigning for some time prior to February 11th, hadn't you?
Yes.
And you wrote a letter on February 11th to Gary and Mary Young, didn't you?
I did.
Do you recall that?
Vaguely.
Can you go to 17?
Is that 17 in this book?
Yes, Your Honor. We would move Exhibit 17 be moved into evidence.
The court says, any objection to 17? Mr. Gaylord said, no objection, Your Honor. The court says, received.
Okay. Mr. Toss said, there it is. All right, Mr. Harrison, Exhibit 17 is in. Can you confirm that this is the email that you sent to Gary and Mary Young on Tuesday, February 12th?
It appears to be, yes.
Any reason to think it's not?
No.
On this email, you said, relating to your resignation, quote, it was a decision reached after much prayer and fasting and long discussions with my wife. I am choosing to explore other career paths and further develop my leadership skills and character, end quote. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
And then you go on to say, quote, this was one of the most difficult days of my lifetime. Had I not known the decision to be right, it would have been unbearable, end quote. Correct?
Correct.
And then you go down and you make an observation about an individual named John. You say, quote, John is becoming one with the field, which makes him priceless, end quote. Do you see that?
I do.
Who is John?
John McGarity. He was the Central Region Business Director.
It's fair to say that he was at the same level as you in the company. He just covered a different geographic region.
Right.
What do you mean when you say, quote, he's becoming one with the field, end quote?
Good question. I'm not sure. Maybe he was starting to adopt the product.
I thought it was maybe like a Star Wars reference. Shout out to Kira. He was having Star Trek. He was having a mind meld?
No.
He was becoming one with the field. Is that your way of saying he was becoming integrated with the field?
That would be sensible.
He understood the field and the field understood him. Is that fair?
Sure.
Okay. And you say, quote, that makes him priceless, end quote. Correct?
Okay.
Because the type of relationship with the field is invaluable, isn't it?
Yeah, it probably should say, quote, field leaders, end quote, to be more accurate.
Just looking at what it says.
Right.
When you said those words on February 12th, were they true?
I believe so, yes.
When you resigned on February 11th, you were going to work with a company called Clubco, correct?
It was one of the options, yes.
And you called David Hill the day you resigned, didn't you?
I did.
And in fact, it was only a few hours later you resigned.
It was that night.
Sorry, my dog is like crying next to me. Okay, hold on. Sorry.
14.
Champy, you gotta go out. You gotta go out. All done.
Champion.
I don't have any snacks for you.
Oh no,
Nope.
save the keyboard.
Yes. Go. Hold on, sorry. Nope, all done. I don't have any snacks for you, buddy. Okay.
We're line 14. Okay. And you just, for the jury's sake, to introduce Mr. Hill or Dr. Hill better, who is David Hill?
So David Hill, who I generally refer to as Doc or Dr. Hill, very good friend of mine, one of the founders of doTERRA. We're neighbors, more or less pretty close.
And you called him because you're good friends, and you wanted him to know that you had resigned from Young Living, correct?
Yes.
And he had previously worked at Young Living, hadn't he?
Correct.
And you weren't calling him for career advice, were you?
No.
And you told David Hill that you had resigned?
I did.
And he asked you what are your options, correct?
Yeah, correct.
And you told him, I'm going to keep my options open, correct?
Yes, vaguely, yes.
And you told him about the Club Co. opportunity, correct?
Correct.
You told him you were going to send out your resume to see if you could get some bites?
I don't recall saying that.
You don't recall saying that?
Yeah, it's possible, but I don't recall.
Okay. Well, let me ask you. Let's go back to your deposition. Let me ask you to look at page 53 of your deposition.
Okay.
Let me ask you to look at, I'm sorry, sir, line 1 at the top, and there's a question posed at line 1. The question from me is, quote, so you let me go back really quickly. Tell me a little bit more after Dr. Hill asked you what options you were considering. What did you say to him? End quote. Read your answer.
Quote, I told him of the Club Co potential then and informed him that I was going to take a month or two to just kind of put my resume out and see what bites would happen, end quote.
That was your sworn testimony on September 23rd, 2013, correct?
Okay, my memory was clearly better then.
And in response to that, he said to you, you should come talk to him the next day, February 12th, correct?
Correct.
But he didn't say anything to you about a company called doTERRA on that phone call, did he?
He did not.
And he didn't tell you about any new oil company that anyone was founding either, did he?
He didn't.
He just said you should come talk to him, correct?
Correct.
And you didn't know what he wanted to talk to you about, did you?
I was suspicious.
Okay, so he came to pick you up in his car on the morning of February 12th, correct?
Yes.
And you got in his car and he drove you to some offices in Orem, right?
Yep.
When you went to the office, there wasn't even a sign on the door, was there?
I don't believe so, no.
So when you walked up to that door, you had no idea it was an essential oils company, did you?
I didn't know if that's entirely true, though. I don't know if that's entirely true, though. I suspected.
Okay, let's talk about who was at the offices in that meeting because you had walked in the door, right?
Yes.
Let's talk about who was in that building at a meeting you had that morning.
Okay.
David Sterling was there, wasn't he?
Yes.
Emily Wright was there, correct?
Correct.
Greg Cook was there, correct?
Yes.
And someone by the name of Jeff Carden was there too, wasn't he?
Yes.
And he was their lawyer at the time, wasn't he?
Yes.
Did they tell you why they had a lawyer at a meeting with you on February 12th?
They did not, no.
Did you ask?
Not that I recall. I don't think so. He didn't even ask if Carol with a K was there.
Oh my God.
I know. I miss Carol with a K. I feel like that really lightened the mood in the last transcript.
Right? She could have been at that meeting.
I know.
Let's
We
not
miss you,
forget
Carol with a K.
K.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And at that meeting on February 12th, that was the first time you learned that David Sterling and Emily Wright were creating a new essential oil company, correct?
No.
In fact, you were surprised that they were creating an essential oil company, weren't you?
No. I had deduced that they were doing that.
You didn't know that Dr. Hill and the other executives were working on an essential oils company until February 12th, 2008. That's your sworn testimony, isn't it?
I don't know for certain.
You didn't know at all, did you?
Oh, I had suspicions. I had deduced.
Okay, Mr. Harrison, I'd like you. We're going to play a video clip, but I want you to be able to turn to it in your deposition.
Okay.
First, I want you to turn to page 56. Look at lines 3 through 6 and lines 20 through 22. This is in reference to the meeting on February 12th. Please play the clip.
Mr. Gaylord says, objection, Your Honor, may we approach? And the court says yes. A sidebar discussion was had.
Let me direct your attention, Mr. Harrison, to line 3 of page 56. And the question posed by me was, quote, was this the first time that you had heard these individuals you were meeting with were in the process of creating an essential oils company? End quote. Was that your answer? Oh, what was your answer?
My answer was based on my recollection at the time was yes.
No, sir. That's not your answer. Read your answer in the deposition.
Quote, yes, end quote.
Your answer didn't say, quote, based on my recollection at the time, end quote, or anything else. It was an unequivocal, quote, yes, end quote, wasn't it?
True.
Okay. And then the next question I asked you was, quote, were you surprised that they were creating an essential oils company, end quote? Do you see that question?
Yes.
And what was your answer to that, sir?
Quote, a little bit because of rumors had been that they were starting a juice company, end quote.
And I'd like you to turn to page 52.
Mr. Smith says, objection, Your Honor. The question should still be read from 11 down to 19 on that page, on the same page, 56, in context.
Your Honor, in no way, shape, or form is that required by the rules for impeachment.
Mr. Smith says, the court already sustained my objection. The court already sustained my objection. 106 requires the content read. It puts it in context, the response.
Your Honor, that would literally turn impeachment on its head.
The court says, I'll let you pursue it on cross. Go ahead, counsel.
Mr. Todd, thank you, Your Honor. Now I'd like you to look at page 52, line 10.
Okay.
And I'm going to read a series of questions for you here from line 10 to line 25. In this question, the beginning question is, quote, let me direct your attention to Exhibit 124. In the beginning of the second paragraph, it says, Justin discovered that Dr. Hill, end quote.
Mr. Smith says, objection. Object to the question posed. Reads from an exhibit, not in evidence presently.
Mr. Toth, that's fine, Your Honor. That's fine. Absolutely. I'll rephrase that. No problem, Mr. Smith. That will actually make that a lot cleaner. Let's drop down to line 18. Do you say that?
I do.
Quote, question, didn't Dr. Hill explain to you in this phone call on February 11th, 2008, that he and others were working on a new essential oils company, end quote. What was your answer?
Quote, he didn't know, end quote.
When did you first learn the information contained in Exhibit 124 that I just read?
The following day.
That's February 12th, correct?
Correct.
You were here for Rob James's testimony Wednesday, weren't you?
I was.
And you heard Rob James testify that you were on a phone call with him and Gina Truman where you were talking about doTERRA, didn't you?
I did.
And when you gave your sworn testimony back in September 2013, you didn't know what Rob James had sent You didn't know that Rob James had sent an email to David Sterling describing that call, did you?
I didn't know about that call or that email, no.
And you didn't know that Rob James would remember that call, did you?
I didn't remember the call.
Let's go back to this meeting. You said the meeting lasted about an hour, right?
As I recall, yes.
Okay, and Mr. Sterling was there?
Yes.
What did Mr. Sterling say at that meeting?
Sorry, it's been too long. I don't recall specifics.
You literally can't remember a thing he said at that meeting?
Not specifically, no.
How long was he at the meeting?
I don't know. Sorry.
Did he seem excited to see you?
He did.
Did he greet you?
I believe so.
Did he seem surprised to see you?
That I can't say.
You don't have any recollection of that at all?
No, not from him. No.
Emily, right. Was she at that meeting? She was at that meeting, correct?
She was.
Was she excited to see you?
She was.
And what did she say at that meeting?
In the meeting, I don't recall specifically.
Well, you talked about the goals of their new business, didn't you?
Most likely, yes.
Sorry, And they gave you some oils to sample, didn't they?
I did smell some oils.
And you testified earlier that their lawyer was at this meeting also. Do you remember that?
He was.
What did their lawyer say to you at that meeting?
Mr. Gaylord says, objection, Your Honor, calls for hearsay. And the court says, response?
Mr. Toss said, it's not for the truth of the matter asserted, its words were spoken. The lawyer was participating in the meeting also.
Mr. Gaylord says, still hearsay.
Oh, Mr. Smith. Oh, where are you? Oh.
Mr. Smith said, I joined the objection, and then the court.
I put the wrong color.
You're good.
The court says sustained.
Mr. Toth, do you recall, one way or the other, whether the lawyer said anything to you at the meeting?
I don't. I recall he was there.
Let's move to Exhibit 51. Don't publish it yet. Mr. Harrison, would you please turn to Exhibit 51 in your binder?
Mr. Smith says, exhibit number?
51.
Mr. Smith says, sorry.
Boy, Mr. Toth is rude. Mr. Toth, do you have that in front of you, Mr. Harrison?
I do.
Is that your signature on Exhibit 51?
It is.
And is it dated February 12th, 2008?
It is.
And did you sign that request for information on February 12th, 2008?
I believe so.
Your Honor, we would move for the admission of Plaintiff's Trial Exhibit 51.
The court says, any objection? Mr. Gaylord says, no objection, Your Honor. And the court says, it's received.
Mr. Toth says, Mr. Harrison, you signed this request for information on the day that you had this first meeting with the founders of doTERRA, correct? February 12th, 2008.
Correct.
Who asked you to sign it?
I'm not sure.
What was your understanding of why you had to sign it?
I can assume an understanding. I don't recall at that time.
I don't want you to assume an understanding, sir, if you didn't have. I'm asking at that time, what was your understanding of why you had to sign it?
I would say just Mr. Smith or Gaylord says, objection, Your Honor. He says, go ahead. And back to the witness. To request information about doTERRA.
Mr. Toss said, did anyone at the meeting tell you why you had to sign it?
Not that I recall, no.
Did the lawyer tell you why you had to sign it?
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay, says Mr. Gaylord. And Mr. Smith says, objection, Your Honor.
It's a yes or no question.
The court says overruled. And the next question I would consider hearsay. And back to Harrison, not that I recall. Mr. Smith says, Your Honor, the question phrased was, quote, did he tell you why? End quote. That's...
Mr. Toss said, no, that's not the question. The question was, did the lawyer tell you that you had to sign it? That was a yes or no question.
Mr. Gaylord says, still objection, hearsay, move to strike. And the court says, I'll allow that question.
Mr. Toth, not all the statements contained in this document are true, are they, Mr. Harrison?
I'm unfamiliar with what you're trying to say.
We all are. Okay, sorry. I'm just asking, did you believe when you signed this? Let me ask you, put it to you this way. Is it your testimony in front of the jury that all the statements when you signed this request for information, that all these statements were true?
Let me read it.
Okay.
I'm going to answer, I'm not certain.
You're not certain if these statements are true?
Correct.
That's fair. For example, you say, quote, I acknowledge that I've initiated any and all contact and communication with the company and have pursued such information without solicitation from the company, any of its owners, agents, or employees, end quote. Correct?
That's what it says, yes.
And when you had spoken with Dr. Hill, he didn't tell you where you were going, did he?
He did not.
You didn't ask him to take you to doTERRA's offices, did you?
No.
In fact, Dr. Hill took you to a meeting at doTERRA's office, and you didn't know where you were going, to meet with their founders, right?
It's likely that we talked about it on the way there.
That wasn't your testimony back in September of 2013, was it?
I don't recall.
So you got taken to a meeting, you walk into a room, and there are the founders of doTERRA. And that's when you first learn of and start discussing doTERRA, right?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not true that you're the one who initiated contact with doTERRA. You were taken to a meeting without being asked to be taken to it, weren't you? That's your testimony?
Mr. Smith says objection, compound as phrased, and the court says, I'll have you rephrase.
Mr. Toth said, it's not true you were taken to a meeting with doTERRA's founders, correct?
It's not true that I was taken to a meeting.
That's a bad question. It's very good you're asking me to rephrase it. I'm sorry.
I'm confused, sorry.
You should be confused. That's not a very good question. On the morning of February 12th, your testimony is, you didn't know where you were going when Dr. Hill picked you up, did you?
I don't recall.
Okay, but you didn't ask Dr. Hill to take you to go visit with the founders of doTERRA, did you?
I did not.
He took you there on his own, didn't he?
Yes.
You didn't know that day you were going to meet with David Sterling and Emily Wright, did you?
I don't recall knowing what I knew that day.
It's like a Gary Young answer. Mr. Toth, you can take that down. We'll come back and talk about this document a little later. But take that down for now, please. You claimed at this February 12th meeting they didn't make any business proposal to you, did they?
Not that I recall.
They didn't ask you to be their founding master distributor, did they?
No.
In fact, you claim they didn't even ask you to be the master distributor until the end of March 2008, right?
Yeah, it was, approximately in there somewhere.
In fact, when you walked out of that meeting on February 12th, your testimony is you were only going to start investigating this new company called doTERRA, correct?
Correct.
Find out if it was a good opportunity?
Discovery stage.
Sure. They gave you some oils, correct, after that meeting so you could sample them and test them with you and your family.
I smelled some oils. I don't remember if I took any.
All right. Was the quality of the oils important to you?
Very important.
What did they tell you about the quality of their oils in that meeting?
Mr. Smith says objection 403, and the court says overruled. The best I can recall, they were excited about the quality they found.
Mr. Toth said, and did they tell you anything about how they test their oils?
I don't recall.
Nothing at all?
Sorry.
How did you satisfy yourself that they really had better oils? They really had good quality oils.
Mr. Smith says objection, irrelevant under 401 and 403. And the court says, what's the relevance?
This is Mr. Toth speaking. Mr. Smith and Mr. Gaylord spent a lot of time in opening statement talking about this is a new company, better company with better oils. I'm curious how their founding master distributor was recruited there, since he told us the quality of the oils was important.
Mr. Smith says, curiosity does not make it relevant. 401 under breach of contract claim as to why Mr. Harrison thinks the oil is better or isn't. And the court says, I'll allow it. Go ahead. Back to Harrison. To me, they know that I love frankincense essential oil. It's my favorite. And that was the oil I remember smelling the most. And it just smelled, it was just an amazing aroma. It felt clean. It felt good. It smelled good.
Ugh. Sorry. Mr. Toth said, you call frankincense, quote, Frankie, end quote, for short?
I do, yes.
With respect to, let's just talk about frankincense for a minute. What did you do for yourself and your investigation of this new company to satisfy yourself that they had a good enough frankincense for you to go out and become involved with this company?
Look at that quote that Karina said, better oils, better ingredients, Papa John's.
That would be...
Pizza oil is the best kind of oil.
Oh my
okay.
God.
I don't even know what frankincense smells like.
It's kind of like a very woodsy kind of. It has some sharper notes to it. It smells good. Do you have some?
I was looking through the things. I don't
sample
know.
packs?
Peppermint, lemon, thieves, peace and calming, lavender, and lavender. That's it.
Yeah, frankincense. They have two different kinds. They have sacred frankincense, which is expensive, and they have regular frankincense, which is expensive.
And there's a difference.
Yeah, one of them, I don't know.
It's sacred.
Yeah, one is sacred. One is overpriced. I don't know. I don't know the difference. I think it's different where it comes from. I don't know. It smells like Jesus cat. It's hot.
I don't know what myrrh smells like either.
Oh, myrrh smells okay. I feel so bummed that we're missing so many of these amazing comments. But
I know somebody else earlier had mentioned that it doesn't say therapeutic grade, right?
Oh yeah, they had to remove it.
They had to remove it.
Yep.
These still say therapeutic grade on them.
Yep. So do the ones I have. I don't remember when they had to remove it. Kira probably. Okay, frankincense is kind of like the classic incense smell.
Oh, okay.
It's all overpriced. Yeah. They have to pay all their lines, so.
Peace and calming. That's a blend.
Peace and calming is pretty. I like it. I don't know. I feel like I'm still brainwashed. I like some of the smells. I don't know.
Smells can smell, Yeah. It's tangerine, orange peel, ylang ylang, patchouli, and a blue tansy flower oil. So
blue tansy, I love. I love blue tansy. Yeah. Cedar. One of them does smell like cat pee. I don't remember which one, but it smells more like that for different people because I think, I don't even know what I'm spouting if it's still like brainwash speak or not. So I know some people, it smells different to different people because of how people.
Cat pee oil.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cat pee is so hard to get out of things.
Oh, yeah.
I'm so grateful my cats don't do that anymore. They used to. Especially growing up.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're on line 3. Mr. Gaylord objected, and then
relevance. Okay. Witness. Oh, Mr. Smith joined in, and the court said overruled. And back to Harrison. I don't recall specifically other than using the product. The results speak for themselves, I think.
Mr. Toss said, how long after you had a chance to investigate the company after February 12th, how long after that did you decide, I want in, I want to be involved with this company?
I don't remember a specific date of decision per se. I definitely wanted to know more, learn more. Their model of marketing was extremely important to me, which was still undecided at that time. Their compensation program, because of certain compensation programs, I would not participate in. So that was still unknown to me at that time. So it would have been, again, I can't recall a specific date.
Not at all. You can't tell us whether it was May, April, March, what?
It would have probably been the 1st of March, end of February, somewhere in there.
Okay, fair enough. So around, I don't want to hold you down to something that's not specific. You can say in front of the jury that beginning of March is about the time you decided to be involved in doTERRA. Is that fair? Am I characterizing your testimony fairly?
Mr. Gaylord says, objection, foundation. Your Honor, he's testified he can't recall. Now he's putting a date on it.
He just said it was beginning of March.
The court says overruled, and back to Mr. Harrison. I probably made the decision to be involved at least in some way by the end of February.
Mr. Cha said, okay, by the end of February?
Again, I don't recall specifically.
Sir, I'm not trying to play gotcha. I'm not trying to pin you down to an exact date. I'm trying to get a sense of when did you, after you went through this, what was just an investigation period after February 12th? When did you cross that threshold of saying, I want to be involved? Now your testimony is, it's the end of February, correct?
Yeah, it could have been into March too. Sorry.
Okay, but no earlier than the end of February.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, and your testimony is that you joined doTERRA as a master distributor on April 1st, 2008, correct?
I believe so. The decision to be a master distributor was around that time, yes.
And prior to that time, you didn't consider yourself a distributor with doTERRA, did you?
Where am I? Oh, prior to April 1st?
Yes, sir.
I think I did. Well, I'm not certain, actually.
Oh, my God. Well, you weren't trying to do any work for doTERRA prior to April 1st because there would have been nothing to work with, right?
No, I did offer suggestions and my ideas.
Well, my question is a little different than that. You weren't trying to do any work to build a downline at doTERRA prior to April 1st because there would have been nothing to work with, right?
I know I attended some meetings. I obviously was interested in the company and the product. So I guess your definition of doing work for, was I employed by the company? No. Was I being paid by the company? No.
Well, I guess my question is really simpler than that. My question is, you know what it means to do work to build a downline, correct?
Correct.
So my question is really simple. Prior to April 1st, you weren't doing any work to build a downline at doTERRA because there wouldn't have been anything to work with?
There wasn't any product to work with. That's true.
So...
But I don't recall if there was...
What do you mean you don't recall?
If I was doing other activities, other things, like recruiting people without a product.
Let me direct your attention to page 729 of your deposition.
Okay.
And apropos to the discussion we've just been having here, let me direct your attention to line 4 of 79. Do you see that?
And just a note, if anybody's just listening and not watching, he did not say that little part about recruiting without a product. That was me. Okay. Back to this. I do.
And let's just read the question and answer back and forth to each other for a minute, okay?
Okay.
Question. When did you begin work to establish your own distributor business at doTERRA?
After deciding to be a distributor.
So that would be after April 1st, 2008?
April 1st, yes, as best as I recall.
So prior to April 1st, 2008, you weren't doing any work with trying to build a downline with doTERRA.
No, negative. There would have been nothing to work with. End quote.
Thank you. So, sir, that's your sworn testimony about how you learned about doTERRA, correct?
Based on my recollection at the time, yes.
And that's the testimony you want this jury to believe?
Yes.
And that story isn't true, is it?
I don't understand.
You knew all about doTERRA long before you left Young Living, didn't you?
I did not.
In fact, you were helping recruit key distributors to doTERRA before you even resigned from Young Living, didn't you?
No.
Distributors like the Trumans, right?
Referring to?
Any of the Trumans. Boyd, Sandy, Gina.
No.
Carol?
With the K? No.
You were here for Rob James's testimony, weren't you?
I was.
He's someone you've known for almost 10 years now, right?
Yes, I met him at an event at Gina's house.
Okay, and by, quote, the event at Gina's house, end quote, you're talking about the February 28th meeting, correct?
I am.
You heard Mr. James testify about participating in a phone call with you and his wife and Gina Truman on February 7th, 2008. Do you remember that testimony?
I do.
Do you disagree with his testimony that you were participating in that call?
I do vaguely remember the call, yes.
If he reported to Mr. Sterling that you discussed Operation Smooth Move with him and Gina on that call, do you deny that?
I do not recall reference to that, no.
Is it your testimony that you have no idea what Operation Smooth Move is?
True.
You didn't know there was a plan to move the Trumans and other key distributors to doTERRA?
I did not know.
You don't deny being on that phone call with Gina Truman and Rob James and Wendy James on February 7th, do you?
I do recall Mr. Smith says, objection, asked and answered, and the court says overruled. Back to Mr. Harrison. I do recall that Rob was on the call and Gina was on the call. I have no recollection of Wendy being on the call.
Mr. Toss says, my question is, you don't deny being on that call on February 7th, do you?
Mr. Smith says objection, asked and answered, and the court says overruled. And back to Mr. Harrison. No, I don't.
Mr. Toss says, do you deny telling them about your plans to do what you were going to do at doTERRA?
I remember the call. Mr. Smith says objection, lack of foundation, and the court says overruled. Back to Mr. Harrison. I remember the call happening. I don't remember the details.
Mr. Toth says, is it going to be your testimony in front of the jury that you don't remember anything that was said on that call, sir?
Correct.
So, just to be clear, you didn't encourage Gina Truman to join doTERRA on that call?
Nope.
You didn't discuss Operation Smooth Move on that call?
Nope.
You didn't talk about a way to transition the Trumans over to doTERRA on that call?
Nope.
Gina Truman is now a doTERRA distributor, isn't she?
She is.
We saw Boyd Truman on video, sort of, yesterday, you remember. Boyd Truman is now a doTERRA distributor, isn't he?
He is.
But you were still a Young Living employee at the time you conducted, at least on February 7th, 2008, weren't you?
Yes. When they called me, yes, I was still an employee.
Let's talk about some more about how you learned about doTERRA, okay? Can you please put up Exhibit 4, Don't publish it quite yet. I want to make sure it's okay with counsel.
Mr. Gaylord says, objection, no foundation. Mr. Smith says, I object not only for foundation, but it's 403. Mr. Gaylord says, join in that. And Mr. Smith says, cumulative on planning.
Mr. Toss says, Your Honor, the exhibit was admitted and used in front of the jury in opening. It is relevant, and it's been found relevant and probative by the court in other rules. It's relevant to establish timing of communication.
Mr. Smith says, was not used.
Goes to credibility.
Mr. Smith says, it was not used by us in our opening, Your Honor. It was used by them at their risk, as the court pointed out. At some point in time, we've argued there is cumulative effect of this. This is now we're now there.
Your Honor.
The court says, I'll allow it subject to appropriate foundation.
Okay.
The court says, and authentication. Mr. Gaylord says, before you publish it, he's got to, and the court says, that's what I'm saying. Subject to authentication and foundation, I'll allow it.
Mr. Toss says, do you recall having a telephone call with Emily Wright in October on the week of October 7th, 2007?
I don't.
Let's jump ahead to Plaintiff's Exhibit 21, which Mr. Gaylord kindly just said it was admitted. There are, Mr. Harrison, just for the sake of the jury, these are your phone records, and they've now been stipulated to and admitted so that the jury can look at your phone records and see calls that you had during a certain time period. Okay?
Mr. Gaylord says, objection to the use of the term, quote, stipulated, end quote. We have an objection that's been placed on the record. And the court says, it was allowed over objection, but I have received it. Go ahead.
Mr. Toss said, Mr. Harrison, I'd like you to look at page 48. Let me make this. Can I approach the witness, Your Honor?
The court says, yes, go ahead. Mr. Smith says, Your Honor. When he says 48, I'm not certain I understand the methodology because it's 21.00.
And Mr. Toss said, I just explained that to Justin, too.
Mr. Smith said, I'm sorry. The exhibit they provided to us doesn't have a number at the bottom. On my records, on the one, it does. It's difficult. It's 5903. And the court says, does it have a Bates number on it? And Mr. Smith says, yes.
Mr. Toss said, yes, it actually has two Bates numbers, the original Bates number and the trial exhibit number, Your Honor.
The court says, yes. And Mr. Smith says, thank you. I'll find it with the Bates number. I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay. Harrison says, okay, I'm there.
Mr. Toss said, do you see that? Can I ask you to look at line 277?
Okay.
And do you see on line 277 at 6:27 p.m. on October 11th, there's redact.
Oh, no.
Okay, sorry. There's an incoming call from phone number redacted.
Do we need to start the whole thing, the whole page?
No, I'll be able to take it out. 1:13:28. Yeah, I'm writing it down. Yeah, we could just go. We could just keep going. And then I said, and you know that's Emily Wright's cell phone, correct?
Okay. I didn't know that. I don't have her number memorized.
All right. I'll represent to you that that's Emily Wright's phone number, and her sworn testimony is that's her cell phone. Okay?
Okay. Mr. Smith says, Your Honor, I don't know that to be the case, and I reserve the motion to strike if that happens not to be accurate.
This is an easy 104B issue, Your Honor. Emily Wright will testify that's her cell phone. We can prove it up that way.
Mr. Gaylord says, we make the same objection subject to, and the court says, I'll reserve on that. Mr. Smith says, if it's accurate, it's accurate. I don't have that memory in my mind. It's her phone number either. So, and the court says, all right.
Mr. Toss said, when Emily Wright, do you see this phone call from Emily Wright?
I do.
It's October 11th, 2007. When this call comes in, it lasts for 6 minutes.
Okay.
Did Emily Wright tell you in that phone call that she had sent out an email to the other members, the other founders of doTERRA on Sunday, October 7th, saying, quote, it's time to pull Justin in, end quote?
Mr. Toth, I don't have memories of any phone calls with Emily Wright.
Okay.
I do know that I did have calls after reviewing documents that have been presented in this case, but...
So that's fine, Mr. Harrison. All I want to know is, on this phone call right here, is it going to be your testimony to the jury that you have no idea what she called you about?
No idea.
And you don't remember her telling you she wanted to bring you in as their master distributor?
I don't remember her calling me ever during this time period.
Okay, sorry, 1 second. I have to blow my nose.
Avery, that makes me so happy and excited. She said, never thought I'd enjoy listening to someone read court transcripts. Yay. Thank you. Thank you, Tanya.
Okay, sorry, I'm back.
Oh my God. I just need to take a quick drink. I'm going to take Mr. Toth off.
Was that a little cough?
Yes.
It sounded like on Mean Girls, like I'm sick. That's great.
Oh my gosh. I'm so bummed we're missing all these comments because they look amazing. I'm glad y'all are enjoying this. I think it's better with the voice mods sometimes adding. Mm-hmm. I feel like Toth is a little rude. He's reading really rude. I mean, I know I'm playing into it, but I'm sure maybe he's not actually this rude.
It seems like from the context, the tone fits.
Yeah.
And is appropriate.
Yep. All right. Okay.
This time period.
Okay. 14?
Yeah.
And when you say, quote, this time period, end quote, what do you mean by that?
I'm assuming you're referring to the time period.
The time period?
In question.
Between this, so late 2007, up until the time you resigned from Young Living.
Correct.
You don't remember any of those phone calls?
No, I know I testified in my deposition that I had no calls with Emily Wright.
Yes.
And that was true based on my recollection at the time. Upon review of documents that have been presented to me in this case, I can see there was calls, but I was surprised. I don't recall.
Your testimony now to the jury is you don't remember what any of those calls were about.
Nope.
So just to put a fine point on this, we can move on from this phone call from Emily Wright. She did not ask you to be involved in the new essential oil company that they were forming?
I don't recall the details of the call.
Okay. You can't say one way or the other. Is that what you're saying?
I don't even remember there were calls, so that would be true.
Is it fair to say, Mr. Harrison, that I want to be accurate because you're saying you don't recall the details? Is it possible in this phone call she asked you to become their new founding distributor?
Mr. Gaylord says objection, speculation, and the court says overruled. Back to Mr. Harrison. I guess anything's possible. I don't recall the conversation.
Mr. Toss said, okay, so you can't exclude the possibility that, in fact, she did have that call with you on October 11th, 2007.
Again, I don't recall any conversations with Emily.
David Sterling or Dr. Hill called you on this week of October 7th. Well, it begins Monday, October 8th. David Hill called you this week too, didn't he?
Are you referencing a certain line? I am
Sorry, I'm just asking. Do you have a recollection of talking to Dr. Hill that week?
I do not.
Let's turn to, if I can, sir, I'll ask you to turn to page 46, and it will be low on the page. It's at line 208 of Exhibit 21.
Okay.
Do you have that in front of you, sir?
I do.
Oh, hold on. Redact. Oh. Okay. I'll represent to you that phone number, redacted, is David Hill's cell phone number. Do you have any reason to dispute that?
No, I believe that's his number.
I'll also represent to you that's his... don't look. Do you have any reason to dispute that?
I don't know his phone number.
So this looks like Sunday, October 7th, you had a phone, looks like a 1-minute call. Do you remember getting a voicemail message from Dr. Hill?
No.
Okay, fair enough.
9.5 years ago? No.
I understand. So let's go on to the next page, page 47, which is still the same day, October 8th. This is Monday, October 8th, and you had a number of phone calls here. And in particular, I'd like you to look at line 219.
Okay.
October 8th, 6:49 p.m. I'll represent to you that that's Dr. Hill's home phone number. He calls up and you have a call for 15 minutes. Do you see that?
Mr. Smith says objection. Again, that may be Dr. Hill's number, but subject to a motion to strike if in fact it's not. The court says, I'm reserving on that.
Mr. Tossett, thank you, Your Honor. Do you see that, sir?
I do. I don't know that's his number either.
Do you recall Dr. Hill talking to you on Monday, October 8th?
I do not.
You don't recall him calling you and saying that he had received an email from Emily Wright on Sunday, the night before, talking about reaching out to you to be a founding distributor.
Mr. Smith says objection. It would be hearsay, and it's apparently used for the truth of the matter asserted. Hill's not a party. And the court says, response?
The question is whether he recalls having a phone call. I'm not asking him to say what the phone call was.
The court says, I'll have you rephrase.
Mr. Toss said, do you recall Dr. Hill saying anything to you about Emily Wright telling him to reach out to you to bring you in as a founding distributor on that call?
Mr. Smith says same objections, still hearsay, and the court says sustained. Mr. Gaylord says join.
Mr. Toss said, but your testimony is going to be anyway. You don't remember anything on that phone call, right?
Mr. Smith says objection. The way the question was phrased is unfair to the witness. It's argumentative as phrased. The court says, why don't you rephrase?
Mr. Toth, is it fair to say, sir, you spoke a lot with David Hill between October 2007 and the time you signed on February 11th?
He was a very good friend, so that's probably fair to say, yes.
It wouldn't surprise you if you had more than 50 phone calls with him during that time period, would it?
No.
Would it surprise you if David Hill claimed that he had no recollection of any phone calls with you during that time period?
Mr. Smith says objection. Mr. Gaylord says objection. Mr. Smith says objection. Inappropriate cross-examination assumes facts not in evidence, not an appropriate statement for Dr. Hill cannot be used to impeach him. In fact, there's actually a motion in limine that subject matter the court granted as a result of conduct. And Mr. Gaylord says join. And the court says I'll sustain that. Go ahead and rephrase.
Mr. Toss said, sure. Let's get a little more precise then. Answer that and be a little more precise. Do you recall your testimony that you resigned on Monday, February 11th, 2008?
Wait, so in the chat, I see the hug emoji. I didn't realize that was a hug.
Oh, really?
No. Learn something new. For some reason, I thought that was like a movie thing. I don't know what I thought I think. Yeah, that's definitely a hug.
Oh, hugs for everyone who's having a rough time. Tanya, virtual hugs for you.
All the hugs.
At least we're not these lawyers. Seriously.
That I would have objected to. I know nothing about law. I am very far from being a lawyer or anything court related. But yeah, that question was kind of a lot.
Yeah.
Asking like what somebody else would think about it.
Yep. I think it's like a calls for speculation or something, and I don't even know all the things. Okay. Yeah. Mr. Todd. What did you a little more precise? Do you recall your testimony? So I said, let's look at your phone records for Saturday, February 9th. Oops.
Let's look at your phone records for Saturday, February 9th. And that is Mr. Harrison, that's page 103 of Exhibit 21.
Okay. Hey, Cheryl.
Do you have that in front of you?
I do.
Let me direct your attention to line 231. Do you see that?
Right at the top?
Yes, sir. See that reflects that Saturday, February 9th of 2008. Do you see there's a 23-minute phone call between you and Dr. Hill on that Saturday?
I see that.
Dr. Hill is the founder of doTERRA, correct?
Correct.
And you and Mr. Hill discussed that you were going to be leaving Young Living on Monday, didn't you?
I don't recall the topic of conversation.
Well, sir, you were getting ready to resign from Young Living as of February 11th, weren't you?
I had made the decision by that time, yes.
And you and Dr. Hill were really good friends, right?
Yes.
So is it your testimony that you weren't talking to Dr. Hill on the Saturday before you resigned? The Saturday before the Monday you resigned. Is it your testimony that you weren't discussing with him the fact that you were going to resign your employment with Young Living on Monday?
I do not recall discussing that with him, no.
Do you recall anything you talked about in that conversation?
I do not.
I'll represent to you, sir, that Lillian Shepherd... Oh, redact. Good. Okay. I'll represent to you, sir, that Lillian Shepherd's phone number is... Her cell phone is blank. Do you have any reason to dispute that?
Mr. Gaylord says, objection to the extent. Well, go ahead. Mr. Smith said it's... And Mr. Harrison said, I don't know her phone number.
Okay.
By heart, by memory.
Okay.
Mr. Smith said, I'm sorry. And Mr. Gaylord says, subject to an objection, we'll reserve for later whether it's, and back to Mr. Smith. That was the only thing I was going to say. Same thing. I assumed that was going to be the case. And the court said, I'll reserve.
Mr. Todd said, okay. So you have this phone call with David Sterling on the 23-minute phone call, and it lasts about 23 minutes. That takes you over to 3:15. Who do you call right after you get off the phone with Dr. Hill? You call Lillian Shepherd, correct?
It shows a 1-minute call, so probably not.
My question is, you called her. It's not saying you spoke to her. You called her, correct?
If that's her number, yeah. Yes.
I'll represent to you that her testimony will be, and the evidence will show that is, in fact, her cell phone number.
Okay. Mr. Gaylord says, same objection, Your Honor. The court says, I'll reserve ruling on that.
Mr. Toss said, actually, speaking of Lil, let's look at your calls from Friday, February 8th. So the Friday between this weekend, okay? The 10th and the 11th. You resign on Monday, the 11th. Sunday, the 10th. Saturday, the 9th. And Friday, the 8th. We're going to talk about some phone calls that occurred during that time period. Okay? So let's look at Friday, February 8th.
Page?
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. It's page 102. And there are 4 phone calls between you and Lillian Shepherd on Friday, February 8th. I'll represent they are It was 903. It was a 903 call, correct?
What line is that?
I'm sorry, at line 211.
211.
Then there's a series of calls that go back and forth. It looks like a return call from Lillian Shepard, incoming to your phone for 1 minute. An outbound phone call for 1 minute. Looks like you might be playing phone tag. Then there's another call back from her for 6 minutes. Do you see that?
I do.
Those all occur on Friday, February 8th. And we've heard counsel say, let me be clear, I've heard counsel say you are very good friends with Lillian Shepard. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, she's like my second mother.
You're close friends?
Yes.
I believe the testimony before was you're dear friends.
Yes.
You're people that confide in each other?
Yes.
You trust each other?
Yes.
And we've heard counsel say at least an opening argument, and Miss Shepard is going to testify. She resigned from Young Living on Friday, February 8th. Do you know that?
I'm not sure if that's a date or not.
When you had that, the series of phone calls, including this 6-minute phone call, Miss Shepard just told you she resigned from Young Living, didn't she?
No. I recall her telling me that I remember her telling that to me in person.
So you don't remember her telling you on Friday 8th, in that series of phone calls, specifically the one for 6 minutes that she had just quit Young Living.
I don't recall the specifics. If I were to guess, it was probably about the Ecuador meltdown.
But not the fact that she had just quit her job over it?
No, she told me that in person. I do recall.
Let's kind of advance the ball here. Those were the calls that occurred on the 8th. You actually talked to her on Saturday, February 9th. Correct? Line 226?
Okay.
You called her. See that?
I do.
It's a 14-minute phone call, correct?
Right.
And she had resigned from Young Living on the 8th, so you weren't talking to her about Young Living business on Saturday morning, were you?
I would assume we were.
Even though she had just resigned the day before?
I believe she gave her 2 weeks' notice. She was still employed.
Is it still your testimony that she didn't tell you that she had resigned from Young Living the day before?
Correct.
And you weren't talking to her about the fact that you were going to resign the next Friday. I'm sorry, the following Monday.
No, my recollection is that I told her on Monday I had resigned, and she looked at me and said, quote, guess what? So did I, end quote. And that was an in-person conversation.
Can you give the jury any testimony as to what you were talking about with Lil Shepard on Saturday morning, the day after she resigned?
Mr. Gaylord says, objection, argumentative, asked and answered, Your Honor. And the court says, overruled. Mr. Harrison says, no specific recollection, no.
Mr. Toss said, let's switch subjects and talk a little bit about Emily Wright for a minute, okay?
Okay. It's time.
Oh, you gotta go? Okay.
I mean, yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah.
hear him kind of crying and yeah.
Yep.
Okay, we're taking a pause. We're on page 70. And live chat, we gotta cut it short. Oh, we're good. We are good. We're at the end of the page, so.
The cross-examination starts at, I think, 40. Why did it go to my other one? I think we're like halfway through this direct one.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so we'll just do this be the first half, and then we'll do the second half. Maybe on I'm gonna bring my streaming equipment to I'm going to Houston for my birthday this weekend. To my
fun! Oh wait, do you want to stream on your birthday though?
Do I want to stream on my birthday? Yeah, it depends on my parents are doing stuff, so like I'm gonna bring my equipment and see if it doesn't work out. It doesn't work out, but we'll have it set up.
Okay.
Yeah. So live chat, you've been incredible.
It's 140. Yeah, it goes to 143 for this part.
my God. Yeah, we're gonna have to.
So we're like halfway. Yeah.
Holy cow. Cool.
Not even halfway.
All right. Well, we're gonna figure out when we're gonna stream next, and yeah, we're gonna see if we can maybe get a mod or someone to work the chat to have it pop up while we're reading, if someone's available. So we'll figure that out, and yeah, we'll see y'all. We'll see y'all next time. It's gonna be wild. It's gonna get even more wild. So, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and roll the outro, and we'll see you next time. Okay, bye everyone.